Y'all, this just flipped everything. What you thought was a tragic, confusing case is now turning into something far darker and way more calculated. Because according to emerging reports, Joe McCann is no longer just a witness. He's allegedly been taken into FBI custody and placed right at the center of a potential murder investigation. Let that sink in. The same man who was speaking freely, moving normally, is now being looked at through a completely different lens. But here's where it gets disturbing. Sources claim investigators didn't just suspect something, they allegedly uncovered text messages that raise serious questions, footage that's now under deep analysis, and items that could point toward harmful intent. And if that's true, then this wasn't random. This wasn't confusion. This might have been planned. Now the timeline doesn't sit right anymore. Before, silence. Before, no urgency. Before, no arrest. Now suddenly, federal custody, possible charges. A complete shift in narrative. So what changed? Was something missed, or was something ignored? Because when a case jumps from uncertainty to alleged planning, you're not just looking at one person anymore. You're looking at a system. And now people are asking louder than ever. If the signs were there, why did it take this long? Because this isn't just about one name anymore. This is about truth, accountability, and what really happened behind the scenes. So now the real question is this finally justice beginning? Or is this just the first layer of something much bigger? Y'all, this case just crossed a line that most people weren't ready for. What started as confusion, grief, and unanswered questions is now spiraling into something far more calculated, far more intentional, and honestly, far more terrifying. Because according to emerging reports, Joe McCann is no longer being viewed as just a witness in the tragic death of Ashlee Jenae. He's now allegedly at the center of a federal-level investigation that's shifting everything we thought we knew. But here's where it takes a dark turn. Sources claim that investigators didn't just stumble onto suspicion. They allegedly built a growing list of evidence that paints a very different picture. Text messages that suggest tension, possibly intent, video footage now under deeper forensic analysis, and items reportedly recovered that could indicate preparation for harm. And if even part of that is true, then this isn't random anymore. This isn't a misunderstanding. This starts to look like something planned. And that realization, it changes everything. Because now the emotional weight of this case isn't just about loss, it's about betrayal, fear, and the possibility that this was preventable. Look at the timeline. Before, silence. Delays. No urgency. A man walking free, answering questions, blending into the narrative. Now suddenly alleged arrest. Federal custody. A case that's reportedly being reframed as a possible murder investigation. So the question hits harder than ever. What changed? Was the evidence always there waiting to be seen, or did something, or someone, slow this down? Because when a case flips this dramatically, people don't just question the suspect. They question the system. And that's exactly what's happening now. Online reactions are exploding, voices are getting louder, and one message keeps repeating. If this was building behind the scenes, why did it take this long? Some are even suggesting a deeper theory. That this case wasn't just mishandled, but possibly underestimated, or worse, overlooked until it couldn't be ignored anymore. And if that's true, then we're not just dealing with one shocking situation, we're looking at a bigger pattern, a bigger problem. Meanwhile, at the center of all this, Ashlee's family, already shattered by loss, now forced to process a new reality that's even darker than before. Because hope is finally appearing, but it's coming wrapped in even more painful questions. One voice online summed it up perfectly. We didn't just lose her, we might have been watching the truth get buried in real time. And now the pressure is rising. More scrutiny, more attention. More demand for answers. Because this case isn't quiet anymore. It's loud, it's national, and it's forcing people to look closer than ever before. So now everything comes down to this. If this really was building towards something intentional, if the signs were there, if the system had pieces of this puzzle earlier, then the real question isn't just what happened to Ashlee. It's this. Who knew, and why didn't they act sooner? This story is no longer sitting in the shadows. It's moving fast, louder than ever, and pulling everyone into a version of events that feels far more calculated than anyone first believed. Because what's unfolding around Joe McCann and the death of Ashlee Jenae is no longer being framed as confusion or coincidence. It's being pushed into a direction that suggests intent, planning, and something that may have been building quietly behind the scenes. But here's where it gets even heavier. The deeper investigators allegedly go, the more this case stops looking like a single moment and starts looking like a sequence. Sources continue to claim that the evidence pool isn't just one or two suspicious elements, it's a combination. Messages that don't sit right when placed in context, movement patterns that are now being re-examined frame by frame, and materials that allegedly raise serious questions about preparation. And when those pieces start aligning, that's when narratives collapse. Because emotionally, people are now forced to process a different reality. This may not have been sudden. This may not have been unpredictable. This may have been preventable. And that realization, it hits harder than anything else. Look at how the timeline is being reinterpreted now. Before, everything felt slow, almost passive. Immediate escalation. Aggressive action. Just a wait-and-see approach. But now, everything is accelerating. Alleged custody, federal involvement. A case direction that's reportedly shifting towards something far more serious. So naturally, people are starting to build their own theories. Not wild guesses, but questions rooted in what's now being revealed. What if the warning signs were already there? What if certain behaviors, certain interactions, certain details were overlooked because they didn't fit the original narrative? Because once you accept that possibility, you're no longer just looking at a suspect. You're looking at a system that might have missed something critical. And that's where the story becomes bigger than just one case. Because this isn't the first time people have asked, how many moments like this get ignored until it's too late? Some voices online are now suggesting that the shift we're seeing isn't just about new evidence, but about pressure finally forcing movement. That public attention, that growing noise, may have pushed this case into a direction it should have gone earlier. And if that's even partially true, then the implications are serious. Because it suggests that without that pressure, this might have stayed buried under uncertainty. Meanwhile, the details being discussed are becoming harder to ignore. Patterns, timing, connections that allegedly didn't make sense before, but now seem to form a disturbing sequence. And that's what's unsettling people the most. Not just what happened, but how it might have unfolded step by step. One comment that's been circulating captures that fear perfectly. It's not just the outcome, it's the idea that was building and nobody stopped it. That line alone has shifted the emotional weight of this entire situation. Because now, this isn't just about justice after the fact. It's about whether something could have been done before it reached this point. And that's where everything escalates. More eyes on the case, more scrutiny on every detail, more pressure on every decision that was or wasn't made. Because once a case enters this phase, it doesn't stay contained. It expands into public debate, into questions about accountability, into a demand for transparency that doesn't go away. And now the system itself is under a microscope. Not just for what it's doing now, but for what it didn't do earlier. Because if this truly was a progression, if there were stages to this, if there were moments where intervention was possible, then the conversation changes completely. It's no longer just, what happened? It becomes, how did it get this far? And right now, no one seems to have a clear answer, which leads to the question that's now hanging over everything. If this case is only now being fully understood, if the pieces are only now coming together, then what else hasn't been revealed yet, and how deep does this really go? This isn't slowing down, it's getting heavier. Because what's now unfolding around Joe McCann and Ashlee Jenae isn't just a case update anymore. It's starting to feel like layers are being peeled back, one by one, and each layer is darker than the last. The narrative people held on to at the beginning, it's collapsing in real time. But here's where everything shifts again. The more this alleged investigation expands, the more it stops looking like a single incident and starts looking like something structured. Because sources continue to push the idea that what investigators allegedly found isn't random fragments, it's a pattern. Conversations that now read differently under scrutiny, timelines that no longer align the way they once did, and details that, when placed together, raise a chilling possibility of intent. And if that possibility holds weight, then this isn't just about what happened. It's about how it was allowed to happen. Emotionally, that realization is hitting people hard. Because grief has now mixed with suspicion, confusion has turned into anger, and silence has been replaced by a demand for answers that's getting louder by the hour. Look at how drastically the perception has shifted. At first, hesitation, uncertainty. A story still forming. Now, people are talking about sequences, about build-up, about whether this was something that escalated step by step without interruption. And that's where the theories begin to intensify. Not just about Joe McCann, but about everything surrounding him. What was known, who saw what, and more importantly, who didn't act. Because when a situation starts looking like it had stages, the responsibility doesn't stay in one place. It spreads. Across decisions, across timelines, across systems that are supposed to catch things before they reach this point. And now people are asking something even more uncomfortable. Was this underestimated until it couldn't be ignored anymore? Because if that's true, then what we're witnessing right now isn't just justice in motion. It's correction. A delayed response to something that may have been building quietly in the background. And the details being discussed are only adding to that tension. Moments that didn't seem important before, now being re-examined as potential warning signs. Interactions that once felt normal, now being questioned for hidden meaning. And that's what's making this feel so unsettling. Because it suggests that the truth might have always been there, just not seen clearly enough. One line circulating online captures that fear perfectly. It wasn't invisible, it was ignored. That statement alone has pushed this case into a completely different emotional space. Because now the focus isn't just on what's been discovered. It's on what might have been missed. And that's where the bigger system angle becomes impossible to ignore. Because if this case followed a pattern, if there were indicators, if there were opportunities to intervene, then this isn't just about one investigation. It's about how many others follow the same path. How many signals get dismissed? How many cases stay quiet until they explode into something undeniable? And that realization, it's why this story is no longer contained. It's expanding beyond individuals into a conversation about accountability at every level. Meanwhile, pressure is reaching a breaking point. More eyes, more voices, more demand for transparency that isn't fading. Because once public attention locks in like this, it doesn't let go. And the escalation is clear. Every new detail fuels more questions. Every shift in narrative creates more doubt. Every delay now feels heavier than before. Because people aren't just watching anymore. They're analyzing. And they're not satisfied with surface-level answers. They want clarity. They want truth. They want to understand how something like this could evolve the way it allegedly did. Which leads to the most chilling part of all. If this really was a progression, if it moved step by step, if there were moments where things could have changed, then this case isn't just about an ending. It's about everything that happened before it. Everything that built toward it. Everything that might have been overlooked. So now the final question becomes unavoidable. If the truth is only now coming into focus, if the pieces are only now being connected, then what else is still hidden, and how much of the story has yet to be revealed? And now everything is on the edge. An alleged arrest, a growing stack of questions, a narrative that refuses to stay quiet anymore. Because what started as uncertainty has turned into pressure, and that pressure is now forcing this case into the spotlight, whether anyone is ready or not. People aren't whispering anymore, they're demanding. Demanding clarity, demanding accountability, demanding to know how a story like this could shift so drastically, so suddenly. And the energy surrounding this, it's not slowing down. It's building. Every new claim adds fuel. Every detail re-examined makes the situation heavier. Every delay now feels suspicious in a way it didn't before. Because once the idea of possible planning enters the conversation, everything changes. Nothing feels accidental anymore. Nothing feels simple anymore. And that's why the public reaction is hitting a different level. This isn't just about justice now. It's about trust. Trust in the process. Trust in the timeline. Trust that what's being revealed is the full truth, not just fragments. But here's the reality nobody can ignore. If this case really is what it's starting to look like, then we're not just watching an investigation unfold. We're watching a system being tested in real time. And right now, all eyes are locked in. Waiting, questioning, pushing. Because one thing is clear. This story isn't over. Not even close. So the question that's echoing louder than anything else right now is this. When everything finally comes out, will it bring closure? Or expose something even bigger than anyone expected?